All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another of our International Impact Ironworkers safety calls. We haven't done one of these in a while. One of the main reasons for that is the former director of safety for the Ironworkers, Steve Rank, retired. We didn't get a chance on one of these calls to really thank him for as many years, so I want to do that. Thanks, Steve. He's probably not on the call today. He may be, but now that he's retired, probably not. But I want to thank him for his many years of service, his expertise, and all he did to keeping ironworkers safe every day on the job. He had a long and successful career with that. But now Wayne Cressup has taken his place, and Wayne's got his sails full and ready to go. So here we are back again. So today's topic is going to be hand safety. I'll roll into that a little bit more, but that's where this call is going to center around. But before we do that, I would like to introduce the General President of the Ironworkers, Mr. Eric Dean. Eric is joining us and going to have a few words for us before we start. So with that, Eric, the floor is yours.
Pete, I want to first of all say thank you for continuing to chair and co-host this call with Wayne, our safety director. Our safety team is par excellence, the whole team. But without our employers engaging and providing the culture of safe workforce, we can't get to where we're going to have a year with 0 fatalities and 0 disabling injuries. So today's topic is really important. I do want to talk about keeping our members safe on the job and at home. And the issue is not only physical safety, but mental health affects our performance on the job. So the international impact is providing credible mind, mental health resource. Impact is creating a joint labor management program that allows us to have a vehicle where we can talk in an open format about best practices and what we're working on. So today we'll have industry subject matter experts, our staff, talking about what's available for means, methods, and equipment that helps us get our ironworkers home the same way they arrived every day, safe and sound. Hand safety, throughout the course of my life, I've been an ironworker in Ironworkers Local 63 since 1980. And I look back at where we've come and where we are today, and just the simple things of job sites where mandatory eye protection, mandatory hand protection. So talking about the subjects and the ability to get our job done and having an industry expert, I can tell you that the last probably 5 or 6 major projects that I've toured, they had 100% glove mandate on the job for all craft workers, all site visitors. And it is amazing the type of equipment that our contractors and the owners are providing and the thought process. And it's all data driven, right? It's the science behind how do you prevent these nuisance, nagging eye injuries, hand injuries. Well, ear protection, hand protection, eye protection. Those are very simple. It used to be an optional thing. It's becoming more and more significant. So I thank you for touching on the subject. I do need to remind everyone we have a 0 campaign. Fortunately, we had 2 members so far suffer fatalities this year. Breaks my heart to tell you that. And I want to applaud everyone on the call that keeps ironworkers safe. Those are our union members. Those are the employers, employees. No one ever wants anyone to go to work where they're not coming home intact. So keep those families in our prayers. And let's get on to the important subjects of that. And I am going to beg your forgiveness by kicking off the start of this call, but I have an important one more meeting to go, and so I'm going to be clicking off, but that's not from my indifference to the importance of safety. So to the entire team that works for us, thank you. Pete, thank you. And to all the employers and all the participants online, thank you for being here. You guys keep our members safe, and I'll see you somewhere soon down the end of the road. And I am going to log off here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric, for your time and words. We appreciate that. Your leadership is important in all of these things. Again, I want to welcome you all here. I want to welcome our Canadian members as well. We've decided, obviously, hands. Everybody has hands, no matter where you are in the world. We believe this is an international topic and something that that is critical to keeping ironworkers safe. So a couple of housekeeping issues as we go along. You'll see somewhere on your screen there is a Q&A button. It looks like we actually have one in there now. Once we get rolling, I'll be monitoring that. I'll be presenting those questions with our expert panel. And there also is a chat button. Now, I will not be monitoring the chat button. You can use that. Jeff Norris, the Canadian Safety Director for the Ironworkers, and Blue Coble, District Representative of Safety for the Ironworkers. They'll be monitoring that as we go. Typically, that's a way if you have a question you want to ask of them, and maybe not the full group, you can ask it in there. You can talk amongst yourself in there. I've seen that used pretty extensively before. So I encourage you to do that. But if you have a question you want asked of our experts as we go along, please put it in the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring that, and I will be asking the questions of our experts as we go. So with that kind of takes care of the housekeeping issues. The first person I want to introduce is Wayne Cressup. Wayne is the new Director of Safety and Health for the Ironworkers International. Wayne previously was in the department and took over the new role once Steve Rank retired. Wayne is deep knowledge of safety, of OSHA, and all the things going on with the Ironworkers is extensive. He's doing a great job. I know he's excited to get these calls going again. So Wayne, with that, I don't know if you can turn your camera on, and I'll shut mine off here. But along with that, we also have, and there's two parts to this call. The first one, and the real meat of the call, is going to be discussing hand safety, gloves, right? As Eric stated, so many gloves now. Gloves are mandatory on so many projects. And the second one will be myself and Mike Baker discussing the initiative. But with that, the second person I want to introduce is Ian Lanphier. What's going on here? Is anyone there?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Pete?
Oh, there you are. Okay, you popped up. All right, great. Thanks, Wayne. It was my screen went dark for a moment. Technology. It's our friend and our enemy all at the same time. Along with Wayne today is Ian Lanphier. Ian is a North American construction specialist with Superior Glove. So Ian is an expert in the glove protection, hand protection world. And Ian has a presentation for us along with Wayne. Where I'm going to turn the floor over to them. And again, as you have questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A box, and I will ask them of Ian and Wayne as we proceed forward.
Fantastic. Pete, thank you very much. And Ian, really glad to have you on here, as well as all of our members and our contractors that have participated. General President Dean, again, thank you for being on here and helping to kick this off. President Dean mentioned the mental health side, and I wouldn't be doing my job as Safety and Health Director to not mention that September is Suicide Prevention Month. So you've probably seen a number of different webinars and programs addressing that subject. And I would encourage you to, again, continue to keep your eyes and ears open and try to provide assistance or at least direct people to assistance as necessary based on the incidents that we unfortunately deal with in our industry. As far as the hand injuries go, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this webinar talking about hand injuries or hand safety is, you know, we see the fatalities in our industry. Obviously, most of our fatal focus for are the falls, the struck by, caught in between, electrical hazards. But when we started, as President Dean mentioned, looking at the data, the number one injury that continues to pop up is hands. and it's working with our hands, and that's where we're seeing a number of our injuries occur. And then the second number of injuries is the foreign bodies in the eye. And so as a result, you see a lot more of an impact on driving things to that. And the other element that we are trying to push with this is that it also isn't just only for our field iron workers, our field hands, but also for those that work in the shop environment. And so it's something that was kind of universal. It was both the shop and the field, as well as something that would be addressed for the United States and for our brothers and sisters and our signatory employers up in Canada. And so part of the thought process when we started going on this is I've had conversations with contractors and members all around North America that have had issues with, what are we doing with hand safety? Because we work on a lot of these different projects, and depending on the application, the type of work that we're performing, whether it's laying out decking or doing our placing for our reinforcing work or our ornamental work, and then our structural, what kind of hand protection is really working? And it's a hot topic that's kind of popped up many occasions. And then as we started to see more of the injuries occur, it just made sense to try to tackle something that was more prevalent for pretty much the majority of our industry. So as President Dean also mentioned, a lot more of these mega projects are having requirements where you have to have 100% hand protection, eye protection, head protection, the whole 9 yards on the job site. And part of the issue with that is a lot of times those requirements mandate an ANSI A4, an A3, or an A5 type of a glove. Well, what does that mean? And so that's why we're working with Ian Lanfear and Superior Glove on trying to come up with some criteria that maybe for general purpose, there might be something that works for those kind of cut levels. But then again, we're also trying to work on a matrix of different type of ironworker activities that would have different types of protection, or at least a baseline of protection for hand protection as far as the gloves go. But I'd be getting ahead of myself if I didn't mention part of the issue that we have is we're automatically jumping into hand protection, and that's kind of the last line of defense. If we start looking at our hierarchy controls, we want to start working on things as far as awareness and placement and engineering and work practice controls that we can try to do to help reduce hand injuries. We've seen some contractors, some of our owners are starting to drive things like no-touch policies on handling pieces of equipment or handling loads. And that's one way maybe that we could help avoid some of those different types of hand injuries. So there's things on the front end as far as the awareness goes and as far as our hand placement. And then here we are automatically just jumping right into hand protection. That should be our last line of defense. So as we look at this, we're looking at trying to develop these ironworker-centric tasks and then coming up with a general set of criteria. And it's not just pushing one brand or make or model or manufacturer of these different types of products, but at least having some different criteria associated with the type of work that iron workers perform. So with that, I would like to take a moment and just again thank my team, Jeff Norris, our Canadian Safety and Education Coordinator, and Blue Coble, our District Representative of Safety and Health. They have been working with Ian and his team very closely on getting Ian out to construction projects around North America to work with a lot of our contractors and solicit feedback from our members as far as the types of hand protection that they have been using, what they like, what they don't like, and giving us some feedback so that we can start developing a matrix that actually is more driven by our membership and our contractors than just something that's being come out and dictated and driven down to us from the top down. So I appreciate all the support and the effort on this. I appreciate everybody being on the call to talk about some of these things. And Ian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Ian is the North American construction specialist with Superior Glove and has been a tremendous asset in working with us and with the ironworkers and Impact and helping to get the word out and again sharing information of best practices that would help as far as raising the level of awareness, raising the awareness was regarding our hand placement, and then also then going to the appropriate type and level of personal protective equipment. So Ian, thank you, and appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, Wayne. And I think, I want to kind of piggyback on what you said there. Everything really does start with the hierarchy of safety controls. I come from a previous background in construction. I spent a decade running construction projects. So it wasn't foreign to me when I started showing up on construction sites and seeing some of the challenges, that safety was having. A number of years back, our owner wrote a book called Rethinking Hand Safety, which was really the springboard for everything that we're doing now that centers around the hierarchy of safety controls. And as Wayne said, we're going out. One of the things that we're trying to do in partnering with the Ironworkers is to come up with a standard, a baseline of safety. As we said, we're not promoting one solution over another. We're trying to come up with solutions that we know work with the different tasks, the different trades, and really to help with the different hazards. But at the same time, too, we're trying to come up with a list of solutions because we understand that everyone has different preferences. Much the same way, not everyone's going to wear the same boot because they're not going to fit the same way. Gloves are very much a personal item like that. So I want to just talk a little bit about the process. And Wayne, obviously, feel free to jump in here if some of this really resonates to something you can touch on. But the process on what we're trying to do and the process by which we go about this was, like I said, that came from a book that our owner wrote. And he had done a lot of research through the years, and he visited a ton of different companies and a ton of different industries. One overriding principle that came out of that was we wanted to get people who have, necessarily didn't have a voice in the process. We wanted them to have a seat at the table. We had found through that research that in order for any initiative like this to work, we need to be able to have all the stakeholders at the table. And that means the folks that are actually doing the work, that are wearing the gloves, that are, putting their hands, their lives, everything at risk to be able to give their feedback in the process. Because in our experience, generally what we would see in any industry, not just construction, but it would be, oh, here, throw this out there and let's just see what works. And, or this is what you got to wear. And we found that, that just was not the most effective way to go about it. So, I worked to create a process with other folks in the industry through trial, through some error, and just creating that feedback into the process of what we use now, which has had some great success. I can tell you this program we have worked at to create the same type of program for a large national general contractor. And in 18 months, they saw a reduction of 95% in their hand injuries. So the proof was in the pudding. But what we do is we go in and we visit the sites. We talk to the folks that are wearing the gloves. We get their feedback. We observe. We spend a lot of time observing. And we come up with, a report based on what we're hearing from the safety, what we're hearing from the field, what we're observing. And we come up with some general recommendations for things to trial, because it's not just us saying, "Help, okay, we've seen it. You go use this now. This will work." We actually say, okay, these are some solutions that we think will work, but let's put them in the field. And that's why having that partnership with the signatory employers to participate in this process allows us to get the feedback, the data-driven feedback that we have, where we can find out what's working, what's not. And if it's not working, tell us why. And then we can pivot. And through that, what we're able to do is what Wayne talked about, is design a matrix of solutions that we feel, or not just feel, what we found have worked and have had good feedback and had good response from the field, so that everyone feels empowered in this process. And I'm going to share my screen just to share with you an example of what we're trying to build, just so you can see the functionality of that tool. Let me go here. Boy, entire screen. Give me 2 seconds here, and I'm going to share this with you. Let me know if you can see what I'm sharing here?
Yes.
What's up?
Perfect. So this is an example of a matrix that we built. And what's great about it is that we can customize this. Now, this was customized to, for example, a general contractor scenario. So we looked at different, as you scroll down, you can see we looked at different trades. We looked at different, craft workers that were out there. And we looked at all the different things that you would see in a general contractor scenario. And what you're seeing is these dots are solutions that have worked for various tasks, some being task specific, task specific. That's a tongue twister. But what we found was these are the types of solutions. So it wasn't really just saying this is the only thing that will work. And what we created was a functional tool that safety managers, safety professionals can use in the field. For example, we have a scenario, okay, well, we need impact protection for the back of the hand. Well, they don't prefer leather. They prefer a string knit. Click on that, and it actually takes you to a spec sheet. And I'm going to talk to you about some of what you're seeing here in a minute to kind of shed some light on how we get to these levels and where these symbols come from. But this is just more or less a functional item. It talks about welding. So we had different welder options. This is just creating a format to create options. And for example, here's a leather one. Well, they need an impact. Well, if, one of the things that we're doing in this project is going around to different regions of North America, because we understand that different geographical regions have different climates throughout the year. So if there's a winter option, you click on it, it takes you to a spec sheet. It gives you all of what you need there. So from that standpoint, we're able to create a tool that we hope will be useful to the safety managers, the signatory employers out there, and just more or less a guideline. And, we all understand this submittal process. Well, this is a guideline, and that's really what we're trying to use. If they need an impact, should it be an impact too? And I'll touch on what that means in a bit. Is there, the president said that, he's seeing more and more projects, these larger projects that he's going on, specifying certain standards. I can tell you as I travel around, the more projects that we see where owners are involved and they have their own safety team involved, they're setting standards, and these standards are coming down the pike. I can tell you that that's going to be something that's going to be more and more common as you go. But where do we get these standards from? And it's really from the ANSI standard. I'm going to flip over to this, and let me know if you can all just see this real quickly.
Yep, that worked, Ian.
Okay, great. So what do we mean by standards? Well, as manufacturers, we come up with solutions, and I'm going to talk, kind of get a little wonky into some things here, but we talk a lot about, these standards and creating these standards, but we don't create gloves to a standard. We don't set out and say, I'm going to create an A4 glove. What companies do is they come up with a design, and a lot of them either have in-house testing or they send it out for third-party testing. Now, we all have to send them out for third-party testing certification. So keep that in mind. Just because we have our own lab doesn't mean we don't need to get an ANSI or an ASTM standard stamp of approval. Now, what you're going to see on gloves, they finally come up with this symbol right here that you see all the X's in, where it says cut resistance, abrasion resistance, and puncture resistance. These are you going to see on gloves. It's going to be a requirement on a glove, and it's going to tell you whether they went out for third-party testing, and it's going to have an A level for cut resistance. So it's always going to be like anything from an A1 to an A9. And I'll talk about that in a bit. And then you're going to have in the left-hand corner here, you're going to have the abrasion resistance. And then you're going to also have probe and puncture. Now, if there's an impact bumper on it, you're going to have a separate label that's going to show that. And I'll scroll down real quickly. You'll see an impact level right here. And that will be separate from that. Every one of those has to be third-party tested. So for an example, we were involved with the impact standard, helping to create the standard. And I can tell you that it costs no less than $75,000 to $100,000 just to get one glove tested to get rated. So we don't build a glove to a testing level. We design a glove with the materials that we know work in certain things, and then we send that out and we see where it comes in. And if we need to modify it to get it up there, we make those modifications in-house. So for example, we'll start with cut resistance because that's the most common one. You know, they go from A1 to A9, and you'll see that what they are grams to cut. Now, what that test essentially does is they take the palm of a glove, for example, and they put it on this machine. It's flat, laying flat, palm facing up. They take a razor blade and they add weight to the top of it, and it cuts across as a slash. On each pass, they change the razor blade so that the materials that are used in the glove do not dull that. So you're getting a true cut. And they run multiple tests until that fail point. So that's how that is done. And it goes from A1 to A9, you know, extreme cut hazards. And I'm going to touch on some theories about that and, you know, why, you know, you're starting to see more and more. And I think if you've been on job sites, you're starting to see cut levels go up, but nobody really knows why these standards are going up on a job site. The other is abrasion resistance. And abrasion resistance is solely important because that breaks a glove down. And a lot of your gloves tend to fail prematurely, not so much from the cut resistance as much as the abrasion resistance. For example, you see level 3 greater than 1,000 abrasion revolutions. But you see how much it jumps from a 3 to a 5. It's 10 times as many. That's a huge difference. So very important to know, you know, is abrasion something that we should be taking into consideration, because the longevity of your glove that you're using is really going to be affected by the abrasion level a lot of times. And, you know, when I go on sites, I see gloves at all different stages of its useful life. And if it gets to the cut up stage, a lot of times we're chasing lagging indicators and like, oh, this glove looks cut up. Maybe we need to go to a knee-jerk reaction, go to a higher cut level. But if you don't see how that glove performed throughout the life cycle, it really might be you need to go to a higher abrasion level. So, you know, through the testing, through the field work that we're doing, we're helping to try and determine some of these factors that go into this. And keep in mind, we're going to share this, so you're going to have access to this chart. Great for you know, just basic education with the folks out in the field. Impact resistance is something that's come around in the last number of years. It's fairly new as far as testing. We were involved in the testing, creating the actual impact resistance test. Why is that so important? Because for the longest time, I think if you went out there to like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, you could see these gloves with bumpers on them. And they're like, oh, they're cool. Let's hope they work. And nobody really knew if they worked. They just put them on there. And there was no real method to the madness on where you put them. No guidance as where you were going to put the bumpers in retrospect or in respect to the bone structure or the ligament structure of a hand on where the highest injuries tended to be. So this whole process was created into a low, moderate, and high impact standard. If you don't see these on a glove and you see bumpers, then they haven't been tested. And, you know, that's one of those where, you know, buyer beware type scenarios where you want to make sure if this is something you're trying to protect against, you want to pay attention to these standards. Another one is heat resistance. And this is one that's always been one that's been a little misleading, you know, especially if you got people that are dealing with, you know, hot applications or different things like that. I would get calls from distributors going, well, I need a heat glove, or I need something that can withstand 392 degrees or 400 degrees or 350 degrees worth of heat. Okay. No one's asking the question, how long are they actually exposed to that heat? How long are they going to be touching that heat? Because these tests basically are rated for each level as a maximum temperature where the worker has up to 15 seconds before second-degree burn. So if you've got somebody who's handling something at 350 degrees, but they're doing it for extended periods of time, and you're not asking the right questions, you're going to expose them to potential second-degree burns. So that's where knowing this and knowing maybe we need to go up to a heat level 4. Yeah, that seems like overkill, but if you don't know that the way that these are tested is 15 seconds to what they call 15 seconds to pain or second-degree burns, you could be exposing workers and exposing yourself to, wondering why. Well, this glove doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work. You just had the wrong glove for the time you were exposed to that heat. And then we get into puncture. And this is something that we do see more of, understanding really there are two types of tests. There's a hypodermic for needles and a probe puncture. Now, probe puncture, if you've got people that are, uncoiled cable, that you've got those fine wires and those fine cables, may not necessarily be rated for a probe. And you think you put it out there like, well, it's not really working. Well, you have to look at the type of puncture that it is and familiarize yourself with that. So I think it's important to understand these and familiarize yourself with this and understand that, especially as you go through on job sites and you start to see the cut levels go up, overly important to understand what those levels mean, but then also understand maybe why they're going up. And as we go through and do this project and get the feedback and see the results on what's working, that's what it's going to help us to determine what types of standards and what types of levels should you be having as some baselines within those tasks or task-specific jobs. And I'll share with you real quickly.
Ian,
yeah.
Before you move on from this, we have our first question, so now it might be a good
Sure.
time. And there may be in your presentation where you cover this, but with those of us north of the Mason-Dixon line, and the calendar says, "Oh man, winter's about to show up." We've got a question here. Someone asking about a leather A4 glove that is Cincelate or proper for winter that also has some dexterity. Any thoughts there or any comments regarding cold?
Yes. And that's a great question because you don't see the cold. There are cold tests out there that we do internally, but cold is very much similar to heat. And what do I mean by that? What you're trying to do with heat is create a barrier from the skin to the heat. So that's why these heat gloves tend to be a little thicker, because you're trying to cool the air before it hits the skin. Does that make sense? What we're then trying to do from a cold standpoint is trying to warm the air and give it a chance to warm. So, having a leather glove, a cut 4 glove with dexterity is a challenge within itself, because leather, leather is a thickness. Unlike yarns, we can make different gauges of yarn, much like you deal with your steel and your cable. The higher the gauge of the steel, the thinner the actual piece of steel. Yarn is the same way. So right now in the glove industry, the gauges of yarn range from 7, 9, 13, 15, 18, all the way up to 21 gauge, which is the thinnest yarn. Now, how we engineer that yarn is just as important, because we use materials like you would use rebar to reinforce concrete. We use different materials that we wrap the yarns around, such as steel, sometimes tungsten, different fibers, and how tight we wrap that yarn. So we can get these yarns pretty thin and still maintain a cut level. The challenge with leather is the leather thickness. There's only so much you can do to scale down that thinness of the leather. Once you add the Cincelate, now you've added another layer there to warm that air before it touches the skin. What I would suggest in this scenario is to find a pliable leather. The best thing you can do is to utilize something that is going to be your thinner leather, which wouldn't be a cowhide, which would be actually a goat skin. In goat skin, we have found is 100 times more tensile strength than cowhide. And goat skin has the highest abrasion. And it tends to be a thinner leather. So I would stick with a goat skin cut resistant liner. The other thing I would suggest too is, depending on what they need, look at the liner. A lot of times we think in order to get cut resistance, I'm going to need to use Kevlar. That's not the case. Kevlar was really utilized for heat protection. The same reason firefighters have used Kevlar for all these years is it doesn't let heat out and it doesn't let heat in per se. It protects that. There are liners that are leather gloves now lined with HPPE liners. The same types of yarns that you will see in a string knit glove, we can get those liners fairly thin now and have different cut levels and still have better dexterity because we're using a goat skin glove. Think of it as a shell, and then you got your liner in there. Once you add thin slate, you're going to give up a little bit of that dexterity. But to get the best possible of that scenario, I would stick with like a goat skin, which is, like I said, going to be a thinner leather. And I would stick with something that has a HPPE liner, cut resistant liner in the leather. That's a thin slit as well. That answer that question, hopefully?
I believe it does.
Yep,
Thank
that's
you for
great.
that. And yep. And one other person had asked about would this be available? You had made mention to this chart is going to be available to everyone. I assume it's on a website. Also, a reminder to everyone, the whole presentation will be on the Impact website to review at your convenience within a few days.
Perfect. I have something here. If it'll open up for me, let me see if it'll open up.
Ian, while you're transferring screens there, one of the other things that continues to pop up for us is, I think it's important that I appreciate you sharing everything on that chart, because a lot of these hand protection standards change pretty frequently. And it's always an evolution of trying to adapt. And that's one of the things that we're working on, is trying to at least have not necessarily a brand or a make and a model as far as that type of protection, but at least the criteria of the cut, the abrasion, the impact, the heat resistance for that product. So it's a guide that you can go and find your own make and model versus what's in there.
Absolutely. As we do this, and I like to just, I say this out loud because I do these a lot. I wrote non-proprietary specs, so I understand, having something that's non-proprietary. And that was the whole mindset behind this. Just to give you an idea, there are 7 million construction workers in the U.S. alone. There's not one manufacturer out there that does what we do that could handle 3% of that business alone without getting rid of the rest of the verticals. So it's not about us or any manufacturer for that matter coming and going, we want to corner a market on something. What we're trying to do is provide the education so that really people can make informed, better decisions as they go out there. And by doing that, I think it raises the level of all of our competitors, from that standpoint as well. So, one thing I heard, and it was a safety manager, and I love this, and I always told him I was going to steal it. But he said, I don't believe, we're out there competing for work as companies. We're out there competing for jobs. The one thing we shouldn't be competing with is safety. If there's information out there, it needs to be shared. There should be no competition in safety because everyone needs to go home every day. Because we don't know if this worker today is going to go work for this other company. We just want to make sure that they're going to be safe and they're going to go home. And that's, crucially important. So I have something that I've comprised over the years. And let me just share it real quickly. Make sure you can see it. Can you all see this presentation here?
Yep, you have common construction myths.
Yep. These are things that and when we talk about questions, these are the types of questions that I have gotten throughout the years. when I go in and I meet with safety professionals, when I meet with people. And these are some of the myths that I've uncovered. And I think it's important to kind of just touch on these because, you know, as we go out there, one thing that we're doing, I can touch on it here, Wayne, is when we're done with this process, one of the things we'd like to do is with our marketing team is come up with a glove 101 or a hand safety, rather, 101 module for the union halls, for the apprentices. So that way they have a basic level of knowledge of gloves in general, hand safety in general, maybe hand placement as they come out there, because it's something that we understand what materials work in what situations. So it's our job as a manufacturer to provide that knowledge out there so that you can make better informed decisions. You know, here's the prime example. If I went to a higher cut level, I'd lose dexterity and my glove would be thicker. That used to be the case. But as Wayne just touched on, as these standards change, they change because technology changes. And I can tell you the technologies have changed dramatically in the last 5 years, so much so that, you know, it's hard to keep up. You know, I know from our standpoint, we come out with something like 50 new products a year, which is crazy. But why is this not true? Why is this a myth? And I kind of touched on it. And the myth is that, well, when it comes to string knit gloves, we are finding ways to engineer the yarns much thinner and engineer those yarns reinforced with better materials that lead to higher cut standards. For example, we have 21 gauge gloves, 21 gauge yarn that you can almost see your skin through, but not only does it meet the A9 cut level, it almost doubles that standard when we do the testing on it because they're using tungsten as the inner core. So we're able to come up with things of that nature and do that. And that's where the industry's headed as a whole. And I see this very often when I go on the job sites, you know, that everyone is very quick to point out our cut level is this. And that's the first thing I hear most of the time. One thing that I ask as a question and that I challenge you that are safety professionals on the call is ask yourself, first off, how did you get to the A4 level or whatever your standard is, A3, A5? How did you get there? And one of the funniest things I heard, and it's 4 years ago now, but one of the funniest things I heard that may have had a lot of truth to it was I was talking to the safety manager and I asked this question, and this is when this question became a regular part of my questions on a job site. When I asked it, he said, you know, goes from 1 to 9, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, probably just pick the one in the middle. And that always resonated with me. But I always like to follow it up with this, and I challenge you. How do you know cut is your primary hazard on every task, on every trade? And I say that because I've worked with different companies out there, and there's a company I've worked with that does a lot of civil type work and a lot of utility type work. And when we started looking at their data, we started to find that 70% of their injuries were actually impact related, and a lot of the secondary injuries were lacerations. And if they just recorded those as a laceration because they needed to go get stitches, their knee-jerk reaction would have been like, we need to go to a higher cut level. When really what they needed to reduce their risk factor was maybe to add an impact standard into their repertoire or into their glove offering or their safety program. There's other ones here. I need to take my gloves off to use my tablet or phone, and I can't wear gloves all the time. And then the flip side of that was I would get safety people or foremen. I don't want my guys on their phones. I'm like, well, I used to do projects. I was used to paper drawings on a job site, but those are a thing of the past. You know, people are using tablets. People are looking at their drawings. They're looking at that stuff. And I told the owners, I'm like, well, you can't find your guy on this job site. What do you do? What's your first thing you do? Well, I call him. You want him to answer his phone? So it's kind of that catch-22. So one thing I like to point out is that, you know, touchscreen is becoming an everyday thing, and it's becoming almost like a mandatory tool to have. on a job site. So I think having those things in place is important as well. The next one is, here's one. We buy gloves by the package, so we use one size. What's the difference? I can't tell you how often I still see that. Went onto a job site. Fit is so much just as important as function for a glove. You've got somebody using a glove that's a size or two too big, and they're using a piece of equipment that gets caught in the equipment and pulls their hand into that. Ligament injuries are way more costly in long-term damage to workers than just a cut a lot of times. So, it's important to make sure that size is just as important. And when we're going out, that's a huge component of what we're doing, is making sure that, if they say I'm this size, well, if we send that size and it is the wrong size, we want to know right away, because that's just as important. That helps educate the worker. Maybe I'm not always this size, and maybe the glove shouldn't fit like this at all times, or maybe it should fit better. Empowering them to ask better questions. Another one that we get is, what's your best glove that covers everything? Well, that's like trying to find a unicorn. I hate to say it. When we wear a glove, it's much like boots. You're going to have different wear patterns on a boot. You're going to have different wear patterns on a glove. Not all gloves are designed to perform the same way. So a lot of people would think, well, why would I carry, or why would I have an extra set of gloves to do these tasks? It just seemed cumbersome. Well, I can tell you that, the wear pattern for the task that you're performing may prematurely wear that glove out, and you might end up going through that glove a lot faster. And then you're wearing out, that glove, and you're like, it's just not working. Maybe it's not working for that task. Maybe it's, I just need something for that task, and 70% of the time I'm wearing this, and then you start to find the life cycle of those are going up. So it's about finding the right tool for the task. You certainly don't, I hope, try and screw in a screw with a hammer, anything like that. So it's the same concept here. The other one that I get, well, I got a leather glove that's cut proof. First off, there's no such thing as cut proof, and Wayne touched on it. It's your last line of defense, and gloves are really designed, yes, to prevent injuries, but more so also to reduce the severity of the injury. There's nothing cut proof. And leather without a cut resistant liner is not cut proof. It's not cut resistant, rather. It offers no cut resistance. Leather is skin. And, you will cut right through that. It's the liner inside is what protects the hand. Much the same, bumpers on a glove, is like a shield for the back of the hand, but it's stiff and rigid, so I don't like to wear it. Well, it's about finding the right TPR on the glove as well. Making sure that you go back to those standards, making sure it meets those standards, because with those standards came a layout and a format of where these bumpers should go on the musculoskeletal system, so that it protects key areas. There's a science behind it. So these are some basic, questions and myths that I hear out there. I'm going to stop sharing now and just kind of turn it back to, Wayne, is there anything you want to add, or do we have any questions or things and myths that you guys have out there?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of comments. One that came in that I thought was very relevant, and I appreciate the individual sharing it, was along the lines of awareness, right? Keeping all their fingers and toes and being in the industry for an extended period of time. And that's part of what we're trying to do with what we're going to talk about in the second part of this with Pete and Mike Baker, is the hand safety initiative that the Heartland RAB is undertaking, is trying to raise more of the level of awareness and placement to try to help prevent incidents. And obviously, we took some time today with you, Ian, to talk a little bit about some of the different things with gloves. I mean, with the chart that you showed, it's like trying to read all the numbers and letters on a tire, right? You got all this information on there, and it's like, what does this mean? You know, the size rating, the speed rating, the wear rating, and all the other things that kind of go along with it. And it's the same thing with a lot of these different products, is you have to kind of dig in and understand what these things actually mean. And with what you were sharing on this was really helpful. But now let's take a second here, because I don't want to lose our time, because I know we're getting a little tight on our end for the first part of this call, and that is to explain a little bit about what we're trying to do with this initiative with the Ironworkers and with getting out and to visit some of these different sites. So, and part of our partnership and working with you and a lot of your team, it's getting out onto projects, as you talked about, trying some samples and doing this, but then you're also looking at the wear patterns on these gloves, whether it's for our reinforcing work, for decking activities, you know, the structural type work, you know, things that we have different needs, and then you're looking at that, and then you're utilizing a survey with a QR code, and you're collecting that information that's coming back, and that's what's helping us to generate a matrix, kind of like the one that you were sharing. And there was a question that came up in the Q&A about being able to share that particular matrix. Well, what we're trying to get to is doing one that's more ironworker centric. The one that you shared was more for a general contractor that had, you know, was a multi-trade employer. And we're trying to have something that's more, you know, geared toward, you know, the ironworkers, whether it's, you know, our fabricators, erectors, our placers, you know, type of activity for it to work.
And I think you touched on something that's important, is the feedback. Really, who's creating this? It's the field. It's the folks that are participating in these trials. It's not a scenario where I think it always used to be. It's like, well, we looked at these gloves and these are the ones that we're going to use. And this is what the way it is. And, you know, I think the more we understand getting the right parties to the table, and the more we have done the research as manufacturers, we are now trying to steer not just, you know, our distributor partners, but the industry as a whole, and the industries that we deal with, to say it's important to get the people to the table, to get all parties involved, to get that feedback, because it helps with the buy-in process. It helps people understand, why should I be utilizing this particular type of solution, or why are impact bumpers more important to me than, per se, somebody else over in a different, you know, craft or whatever it might be. So there's an educational component to this when we go out into the field. But I also think it's important for those in the field to understand that we're building this based on what you're telling us. You know, we're just using some standards on what we know as a manufacturer work, and the materials that work with those types of hazards. But really what it does come down to is that's only as good as the people using them, you know, and we need to find out, you know, so that's crucially important.
And you know, you mentioned in your presentation, Ian, a couple of other things. One was the sizing. And that was something that we've, even in our trials, have come across some things where we thought we had different, you know, the sizes, and then we come to find out that they were too big or too small based on the individuals who were using them. And it was good to get that feedback, so we have a little bit of an idea, right? Because every manufacturer is using a different blank when they're doing their product runs.
Molds are different in different parts of the world, and that's one of the things I've discovered, you know. And, you know, I can tell you from personal experience, when I put a glove on, I can tell you if my pinky's just a little long, I know where that glove came from, because, you know, it's just generally speaking in that respect. So just assuming that everyone is, you know, I've worn large forever, then that's what I'm going to wear. That might not be, depending on what you're using. So it's very essential, you're right, for us to figure that out.
And then the other thing that you mentioned was, you know, the cost factor, right? You know, so, you know, we've seen this even when we've tried to pilot, you know, powered air purifying respirators, because there's obviously a more inherent cost for a PAPR than there is for say, for example, a full face or a half face filtering face piece respirator.
Right.
And similarly with something like this, yeah, there might be a product that might cost a little bit more, but it might last considerably longer based on the wear pattern and the usage, because we're trying to get it matched to being the right type of glove for that specific task.
And that's why the trials are so important. And that's why, I always encourage, if you're doing your own trials, I always tell people, listen, take the glove you've been using, give that person next to them that's doing a very similar task a brand new version. Let's see how they hold up in comparison. Let's do an apples to apples comparison. And I think that's, like you said, it's important to look at the useful cost of things, versus a unit cost. And, at the same time too, when I'm working with big companies, sometimes I see, the tail not talking to the head, so to speak, where we've got somebody who's in purchasing and I'm just buying this. And then we got somebody over here who's doing, hey, we're paying out the insurance premiums. We're paying all of this stuff out. And the person here doesn't realize what it's costing them from an injury standpoint. And all these people that are, going home and, we're having people missing work. We can't keep people. And we're wondering why. And it's like, well, there might be a direct correlation over here. You might be, what that old saying, penny wise, pound foolish, that one of those scenarios where maybe we need to look at something that our folks are going to feel protected in, that, we're going to reduce the amount of injuries. And then therefore, I think by default, everything else, the morale, which we all know is so important on a job site, comes up. And nothing worse can happen to morale on a job site than seeing somebody next to you get injured. And it makes you a little gun shy. And I always bring this up, and I mentioned it before. The research that I've done, especially some of the latest stuff, 65% of injuries that are occurring on a job site are to a worker within their first 18 to 24 months in that trade. So it tells us that somebody who is new is at a higher risk. And why is that so important for us to protect them? Well, one, generally speaking, when I show up to a site, they're like, well, I'm going to have my guys who've been doing this forever tested. He's been doing this. Well, no, let's get a broad swath of who's going to test this. But more importantly, we want those young people and these new people coming into the trades. And if we want to keep them, we got to protect them, because they're the ones that are highest risk to get injured. And if you got these two buddies that are coming into the trades and they keep talking, hey, we're going to do this for the rest of our lives and we're going to go through this together. And then one guy has a serious injury. What do you think his partner's thinking? Maybe I need to rethink this, so important. I think there's effects that we don't necessarily, take into account. And those are some of the things that I think about, it's just beyond protecting myself from a cut.
Well, Ian, I really appreciate you sharing everything here. And before I turn it back over to Pete to take on to the next part of this, the one thing I also wanted to mention or ask you to address is a lot of times, especially for our environment, is trying to find product that is, at least made in America or North American made and that kind of a product. And can you share a little bit about what Superior Glove has done in their investments here in North America?
Well, so one of the things that, when it comes to leathers, I will share this. North America, pretty much, we're trying to do it. We're trying to nearshore things, but your leathers from any manufacturer, bar none, come overseas. And that's because of the raw material. A lot of the leathers now are goat skin. To go back to that question that was the winter glove, but a lot of them are goat skin, and the ready supply of that goat skin is overseas. However, one thing that we have done, and I'd like to say, it's not because we saw COVID coming, it just happened to be. We started to nearshore. We had opened a plant in Honduras, I want to say in 2019, that now, basically the middle of 2019, and now it's actually doubled in size. We own 4 manufacturing plants in Canada, and we just opened the first of its kind, the first dip line and first string knit manufacturing facility with a dip line for string knit gloves. in High Point, North Carolina, which the capacity on that is about 600,000 pair per month. And we can double that. So at the end of the day, one of the things that we're trying to do is nearshore everything, because we understand, during the COVID supply chain issue, and now, we see with some of the tariffs, and I think there is this movement to bring things back. We're bringing it back to the Americas, to North America. We're a Canadian-owned company, but the largest portion of our business, believe it or not, obviously is the United States. So it made sense for us to open that up. And that's what we're doing. And, I think what we've tried to do, we're owned by two brothers that have kept it a family-run company, honestly. And they have just tried to, I think their whole goal is, let's make our competition better. Let's challenge them to be better at what we do. And sure, we might win some, we'll lose some. But at the end of the day, who wins are the people that are getting better quality and better standards for them. And I think, if we do that, then we can all put our head down on the pillow at night a lot easier. And that's, I know for a fact, because I know the owners, I know that that's of utmost importance to them, So, but yeah, we are bringing things back. You will see new initiatives. You might see stamps on gloves as they come out. We have some Canadian made only. They're going to have the maple leaf on them. You might see stuff finished in the United States with a U.S. logo on it. So we are taking a lot of pride in that. We are pushing our competition and raising the bar. And we think it's important for a lot of reasons.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time today. And I'm sure if anybody has any further questions, we'll be able to make sure that we get them directed to you, Ian. And I know
Absolutely.
Your availability has always been outstanding in working with the Ironworkers and our signatory employers and getting out to sites. So thank you again for all of your support.
Pete, I appreciate the time. I look forward to seeing some of you folks in the field.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Ian. Pete, I'm going to turn it back over to you and Michael Baker to get into the second part and talk a little bit about what you're doing in the Heartland RAB.
Yeah, one thing, Sean Kelly from Riggers and Erectors is actually on the Impact Board of California, asks the Ironworker centric matrix you just mentioned, Wayne, is that something that's coming down the line?
It's coming down the line. We're working on it. We have been working this last year, Pete, with Ian and his team getting out to sites. Ian has been up to Canada with Jeff, and has also been out to Arizona with Blue. He's working on some stuff with the New England District Council as well as the Western Steel Council to get out to those locations and do some site visits and some surveys with members. And what we're hoping to do is I'd like to have at least a preliminary or a draft ready to go by our December 9th Safety and Health Roundtable meeting, that we can kind of get the ball rolling and share and hopefully generate some additional interest. It's trying to collect enough data that validates it being as statistically valid, to show that this is where our interest is coming. Obviously, just like fall protection equipment, we have folks in different parts of the country that have different interests and different preferences. So some of the folks out west maybe like the longer gauntlet type gloves versus other parts of the country. And similarly in Canada, they have some different preferences as well. So we're trying to take all that into consideration and have some of those ideas out there. But hopefully we'll have some more to be able to share with the group here in the very near future.
Great, that'd be great as we move forward. All right, thank you again, Ian. Reminder to everyone, the information will be on the Impact website. I'm sure in his presentation was a link to their website if you want to get that the matrix they have drawn up for different types of glove for different applications. But we appreciate your time and efforts there. So with that, the next portion of our call is on the hand safety campaign. That a little background story to it. So to tell us some about that is my co-chair out of the Heartland RAB, the best RAB. There is an Impact, Mr. Mike Baker. Mike is the third general vice president of the Ironworkers. And again, we co-chair the Heartland RAB. and I enjoy working with Mike all the time. We've been great friends. He is a Cowboys fan, and his team did send Micah Parsons to my team, the Packers. I thank him for that. So if he's got a sad look on his face, that's what that is. But Mike, if you could turn your camera on, we'd love to see you and hear from you, and give us a little background on the Heartland RAB, our safety call, and where we're going with that.
Sure. Thanks, Pete. Well, a quick history lesson. It wasn't Pete and I that started this. It was Colin Millard and Darren Lett from C.R. Meyer, and David Smeestad took it over after that. And basically, there was an incident with one of our locals and C.R. Meyer, and what they come up with was we need more communication. So the call was started, and it's worked out great. Anytime you can have conversation with the labor and management, it's a good thing. And they had the foresight to start up the website. So they have the reporting incident site. And with that site, you can go on anonymously and leave your incidents. And that's been in place since 2013 when the call started. So we're at, like 12 years now of this being going on, and there's quite a bit of data in there. That's how we got the data for the hand. I'll let Pete talk about that, but that's basically how it all started. So if anybody wants on our call, just contact any of us on the call right now, Wayne, Pete, myself, and I'll get it to my office manager, Chanel. She'll send you the invite for the call. With that, you'll get the username and the password. Everybody has the same one, and you'll be able to put your incidents on the reporting website. And, basically we just try to make it better. We want to make it the best. And I'll tell you what, when we're on the call, the contractors that are on there, they're top shelf. They truly care about their employees, my brothers and sisters, and sending them home safe. So there is some, I'll be honest, sometimes safety can get a little dry, but it is very good dialogue on there. And if you have a question, we send it to the group, and I love it. I mean, Pete helped me out on that.
Yeah.
I mean, we share our successes as well as
Yeah.
our failures on that call, and I think works out really good for us.
Monthly safety call. It's always great information. Our group continues to grow from that. Texas district has now started their call. I think they've been doing it for well over a year. California is starting a safety call for their RAB, and the New England states are also starting, and they have joined our call, and from that started a call in their region. So it's really great what's going on. With that, and I know I saw Blue had shared there for a moment, but I think it's critical. The website is a completely anonymous accident reporting website. You log on, you can click on body type, put in the synopsis there of what happened, and that there's no employee names, there's no contractor names, there's no way of knowing who that is. And I want to say I appreciate what Ian had said. There's no competition on safety, and I want to second that. That's a great way of putting that. I'm going to use that in the future. We may all compete day in and day out, contractors, but when it comes to safety, sending our employees, our iron workers home safe every day, that's goal number one. And I believe that for most contractors, and I certainly know that's for Mike's and the iron workers, that's goal number one, go home safely. So with this, from the data over all these years, we compiled, there's a pie chart coming. You can see on the pie chart, there must be 15 different body types there. What's going on? As you can see, hand, which is one version of the purple, is at 19%. And I know within our company, hands, and like Wayne said, then I second, but hand always seems to be leading the way. Why? Iron workers work with their hands. If you're a chef, you're working, everything we do as humans all around the world starts with our hands. Can't go do anything really without your hands. So we decided, okay, we've got this website. What do we do with the data? It's great to have some data, great to have a website. How do we put this to work? So as a group, we said, hey, we really think, and we had actually done a hand campaign. We started it in 2020. Well, of course, COVID came along and pretty much wiped out that initiative that became all encompassing. So now here we are 5 years later. Guess what? Hand is still leading the way in accidents and injuries for iron workers. So we decided, what are we going to do with this data? Great to have data, great to have our safety call. How can we make a difference? So what we did is we sat down as a group not that long ago, and we're still in the process of really refining it. We're looking to kick this off for a hard go January 2026 and a second hard launch at the Impact Convention. But we really need people to get on the website and report so we can, again, use data to see how we're doing. Blue, if you can go back to that that prior slide. Okay, so I've got it up on my computer here too. I'm going to look at that. So we have the safety reporting website, which again, I would urge everyone to please continue to contribute to that. So we came up with a Hand Safe campaign mission statement. I'll read it real quick. It's our mission is to protect the hands that build our world by eliminating preventable injuries through awareness. We had a great comment earlier, by the way, from someone who said, hey, this is something I've worked hard at in my career, respect for the work, those kind of things. So awareness, proper equipment, and safe work practices. Labor and management commit to working hand in hand, nice little touch there, to make hand safety a daily priority so every iron worker goes home with their most valuable tools, their hands. So we formed a small committee, came up with this. We've set some goals. We want to see a 50% reduction in hand injuries in this coming year. We also decided in talking with Wayne and Blue and Jeff from Canada, hey, why would we keep this as within our RAB, right? There's no, again, competition in safety. So we've really decided as a group, and using this call to have it as a soft launch, to take this international. So for the calendar year 2026, this hand safety campaign is going to be our priority for the year. While there's many other priorities, of course, no deaths is number one for the iron workers. We're really going to make this something to launch. So with that, these are a few of the things we came up with. These would be hard hat stickers and promotional items. But I think we're also going to work really hard on the thought process. How do I keep my hands safe? Not just stickers and shirts and things of that nature, but how do we change the behavior? How do we change culture? Things of that nature. What keeps my mind sharp? Where am I sticking my hand? Because we all know accidents happen in a second. So this is just one of the things we came up with. No hands, no hustle. Ironworking Hand Safe 2026. Different locals can take these and put their local number on there. You see that's Local 75, which is the state of Arizona, of which Blue is a proud member of Local 75. She wanted me to throw that plug in there. So there you go, Blue. And then don't lose your A. As you can see, hand safe, that worked out so that you don't want to lose that finger, right? Protect your hands. So that's where we're going with that. Again, we're working on developing some of the things that would get out there that would change the behavior. And that probably isn't the right word. If Kevin Hildebrandt, my good friend from Iron Construction, was on, and I know he's watching, he'd probably throw the right word in there for me. But really getting into what is it? How do we change the mindset to continue to reduce accidents and injuries of hands? I do see we've had a few questions come in here, comments. Looks like, oh, someone asked, what does RAB stand for? I apologize for that. It's a regional advisory board within Impact I believe it's 13 RABs, 10 in the US, 3 in Canada. I believe that's right. It might not be, but it does stand for Regional Advisory Board. We happen to be, Mike and I, co-chairs, and within each RAB, there's a management co-chair and a labor co-chair. We have the Heartland RAB, which is the greatest RAB. It encompasses locals 8, 21, 67, 89, and 512. I believe I got that right as well.
383.
383. I'm sorry. I apologize to all our good friends down in Madison, Wisconsin, Ironworkers Local 383. So with that, I don't know if anybody has any questions on that or other comments, or Mike, you have anything else you want to share? Or Wayne?
I just want to thank Wayne and his team, Blue and Jeff, and everybody involved. They are truly an asset to the call. They are a tool for our belt. And, you know, and also a shout out to Kevin Hildebrand. He runs a great show. He is our quarterback on the call, so does a good job.
Yeah, I'll second all that. It's great. The content we've really got, it's really stepping up to the plate, our continued growth. And I'm excited and to see these other RABs, Texas, California, and the New England states really take it and run with it. And I've seen they're doing, especially Texas is doing some things, even taking what we're doing and I would say improving on it, making it even better. So we're going to start to take a deep look at what they're doing and maybe learn to incorporate that into what we're doing. But it's great stuff. Again, there's no competition that there's or no question that there's no competition in safety. So, I got a reply that California and vicinity is a pretty good group too. So we'll admit that. We'll go with that. So, yeah, with that, again, we want to thank everyone. Ian Lamphere with North American Glove. I believe I said that right. And Superior Glove. I'm sorry. I apologize. And I don't know if there's any other questions regarding that, but Wayne, if you'd like to close for us. Oh, one plug, November 5 is our next call. We don't have a topic. I say this at every call we've had. I know there's hundreds of people watch these. If you've got a topic you'd love to hear, always let us know. Finally, that happened on the last call. We did. We had a request there, and we're going to look deep into that one. So, but the next call is, again, Wednesday, November 5. We look forward to seeing everybody there. And Wayne, if you'd like to close us out, that'd be great.
Pete, Michael, thank you again for your time and your leadership with the Heartland Regional Advisory Board. And Pete, thank you also for facilitating and moderating today's presentation. And I would also, like I said, want to echo my gratitude also to Christy Rose, who has been the backbone of our safety and health department and has kind of been hiding behind the scenes to help make sure that all this runs smoothly, along with Blue Coble and Jeff Norris. So again, I really am grateful to the team for all of their help. And again, keep an eye out. We're going to be sending out a link to those who had registered with the information that Ian had shared. We're also going to send a post-webinar poll or a survey asking for any feedback on what we can do better. And again, I appreciate all of your time and all of your support for helping to keep our ironworkers safe and in support of our signatory employers. So with that, I would also be remiss if I didn't just say, again, tomorrow being September 11th, just a moment of reflection for those that were lost, 24 years ago for that. And also a note of gratitude for all of our members in the military who put their lives out on the line for us each and every day. So thank you to them as well. So with that, thank you, and stay healthy, stay safe, and tie off.